Okay, we call this regular meeting of council for August 19th to order. The adoption of the agenda. There's a recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of August 19th, 2013 be adopted as circulated. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Question's been called. Those in favor? Motion carried. Minutes. There's a recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of July 8th, 2013 be received. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor, motion is carried. Number 3C, there's a recommendation that the minutes of the special meeting of July 8th, 2013 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Question's been called. Those in favor, motion carried. Did I miss B? Oh, I probably did. Okay, that the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 8th be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Question's been called. Those in favor, motion is carried. Number D, that the minutes of the special meeting of July 25th, 2013 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Carlick-Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor, motion is carried. And 3E, the recommendation that the minutes of the special meeting of August 1st, 2013 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Question's been called. Those in favor, motion is carried. We have 3 delegations here today. We have a presentation from, first off, by Rick Reed, the manager of the Prince Rupert Airport. If he could come forward. I don't know if any of your board members want to come forward with you. That would be fine if they want to. I want to thank you for coming this evening. We've got a very large agenda this evening, so if you could be with 10 minutes with your presentation, that would help us immensely.
Good evening, and thank you. And it's deja vu. The Airport Authority is here this evening to request your support in our application for a loan through the city to the MFA to support a capital program that will see the refurbishment of our air terminal building, as well as our airside pavements, which include the runway, taxiway, and the apron, as well as refurbishment of the airport access road, all of which are in excess of 50 years old and in desperate need of repair and refurbishment. The building is in a dreadful state, requiring replacement of all of its major mechanical systems as well as the envelope of the building. The building is in such poor condition that on a weekend, which you were there, Diane, people had to line up to use the washrooms because there were only 1 or 2 facilities working. And I must emphasize that that's not through a lack of maintenance, but rather that the physical plant has simply failed and needs to be replaced. Here's a list of the elements that are in very poor condition, which is basically the entire building and all of its systems. The only good parts really are the bones of the building when it's a post and beam structure, and the posts and beams for all intents and purposes are in fairly good condition. So what we're doing is taking away everything but the posts and the beams and redoing it top to bottom, and doing a modest increase in some of the public areas, the passenger facilitation areas, including the kiosks where the air carriers process passengers, as well as in the hold room. And that looks forward to about 15 years in the future. Here's some of the pictures of the gruesome areas, and well, you say, oh, they're not maintaining the building. Well, since these pictures were taken, we have painted it, and it's essentially the paint that's holding the exterior of the building together. The upper left just shows you the roof, which has perforations through it, and the building is leaking constantly, which of course threatens then the only good part of the building, the bones, the post and beam structure. The washrooms that we have in the men's area are the ones up in the right-hand corner, and I'm sure we've all experienced the washroom. And we're just showing that and what it could look like. The pictures that surround it are from the Boundary Bay Airport, which was designed by the architect that we have commissioned and was built with private money for about $5 million. This is our runway, just to show you what is happening to our runway. It's called raveling and cracking. And about 13 years ago, the runway was resurfaced. It was done in the rain over a very poor structure. There are actually 3 layers of asphalt in the runway, and it's the mid layer that is completely deteriorated, resulting in the top layer disintegrating. We have to remove about 120 millimeters of asphalt and replace it with new. But you can see with the pen the width of some of the cracks. In fact, some of them were the width of a Dash 8 undercarriage. This is the access road, which we're all familiar with, and that's on the left. The thing on the right is actually the access from the barge, where the barge comes in to bring in all of our heavy goods, such as winter chemicals, our fuel, etc. And that's what the vehicles have to pass over. So the terminal building, let's come back to it just for a moment. The building is not a safe building for human occupation. It rates as a level 2, which is minimal life safety. In the event of any significant seismic event, it would collapse with total destruction of the building and loss of life to all of the occupants. The mechanical systems are in such poor condition that last winter we were without heat for over a 3-week period. The furnaces are 35 years old and parts are unavailable for it. The toilets, the sewage collection system has collapsed, and the only thing to repair it is replacement. All of these things, any of which continue, we would of course have to close the terminal building. So basically, we require your support in order to continue the operation of the airport, which is an absolutely essential piece of our transportation infrastructure here. Now, our remedy, of course, is to refurbish the building, and that would be replacing the entire envelope and all of the mechanical systems with some modest increases in the areas where passengers are processed, including the air carriers' needs as well as the hold room. This is what it could look like. This is the Boundary Bay Airport, which is owned and operated by Alpha Aviation. And this is the building that was done for $5 million. And it too is in a very wet environment. And you can see the large eaves that extend out from the building, which provides protection for the envelope of the building. This is what we would propose to do with our building. On this being the weather side of the building, we would have glass and aluminum rather than wood. That's the area of our structure that takes the brunt of the weather. Another shot of the Boundary Bay Airport. Now, we're requesting a loan of $7 million, which we would amortize over a 20-year period. You can see that we would be spending money in 3 areas. The air terminal building, which is a complete refurbishment. Our portion to rehabilitate the airfield asphalt, which is 5% of approximately $12 million. And that is about a little over $500,000 would be our share. to rehabilitate the access road, which is about 5 kilometers in length, and give it about another 7 to 10 years, is $600,000. The complete rehabilitation of the road, our engineers tell us, would be about $2.5 million. These are estimated. We don't have any tendered prices. These are estimated costs. So we have a business case which includes, of course, an increase in the per passenger fee to our airport. We would emphasize that the taxpayers will not be on the hook for any of this money, that it will be the users that will be paying. We've based it on some very modest increases in our passenger traffic of 3% per year over the 20-year period, which would allow us to pay off the loan within a 15-year period and still have several $1 million of excess in the bank, which would go towards further refurbishment in another 25 to 30 years. So what we have basically is a new air terminal building, a new runway, which would be have about a 15-year life, and a new road, which we've estimated at 7 to 10 years. So essentially, without any capital improvements, we are on the verge of having to close our much needed airport. This is another picture of what it could look like. This again is the Boundary Bay Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Council, any questions? Councillor Ashley?
Well, just so that for the community, and this question is for Mr. Long, if because this agreement is before us a little bit later in the agenda, if we agree to the partnering agreement and we go through MFA to get the $7 million, how much would be left in the account that we could still borrow if we needed to?
Certainly, the municipality has upwards of $250 million of borrowing authority, so $7 million not really going to put us at any kind of a risk of running out of borrowing authority. And that's established in the Act based on our ability to pay and a number of other factors.
Any other questions? Councillor Carlick-Pearson?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the board members as well as the manager and everyone else that is involved in making the airport happen. And I understand it's tough to make any sort of revenue in the economy that we have right now. And I really think that it's important that upgrading our airport is an essential piece, as what you said, to our economy, especially in all the growth that we're going to see in the next decade here. And it's a first impression and the last impression that some people get when they come to Prince Rupert. And if it's not a good impression, they may not come back, which could affect our not only our airport, but also the small businesses and every other portion of Prince Rupert as well. The business plan sounds, feasible, and I'm a little bit concerned that the cost of airfare may go up for people, which is really tough right now to travel out of Rupert. So, I'd suggest looking in also, other than partnering, looking in other funding sources and trying to utilize any other funding sources as well as just a partnering agreement. A question that I had was the Boundary Bay Airport. There's a difference of a couple million there. Now, I'm assuming that their airport probably wasn't as in bad condition as ours, and probably that's why it costed $2 million less to do.
Look at the road and the runway too.
They don't have an access road to maintain, nor do they have a runway that needs refurbishment. And the building was it's a greenfield development, which is much easier than dealing with a structure where you have to repair it and operate it at the same time.
I'm in full support of this because I think it's attracting potential clients and contracts into Prince Rupert, which is going to benefit all of us. And in the direction that we're going in right now, if we want to compete with these other cities that are having all these big economies and industries coming in, we need to do stuff like this, and that includes emergency services buildings, as well as the airports, the hospitals, and recreation and everything else in Prince Rupert. So thank you for coming in and taking the time.
Mrs. Lutz, or Mrs. Marshall, sorry.
Or whatever. I was just going to say is that we are under a bit of a time crunch here, because I think there's something with MFA in the time structure of us getting this money, and we'd like to go and get more money elsewhere where we can. But we're a little concerned about having this drag out for another 6 months, a year before we're doing it. So I don't disagree with you at all, but that is our one problem.
We will be voting on this later on the agenda, so stay tuned.
Maybe even if it's some support, financial support in the the futuristic about having future support of sponsors out there, whatever it is, to keep our so it doesn't get run down as quickly with ongoing support.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also like to thank you for coming, and I know you're working on a shoestring and have been for a long time, and we admire you for that. And there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever, I'm for this too, because we are going to be expanding and we need proper airline equipment, etc., and just so that these business people can get in and out. Thank you.
Mr. Reid.
If I may add to that, that most of the large companies who have come through the airport come eventually to see the airport authority. The first question they ask is, what are your capital plans? They can see the condition of the facilities. They ask what the length of the runway is, and that's very important to them because they'll be bringing heavy aircraft in and heavy equipment. So they're very interested in this piece of infrastructure. It is absolutely essential to the success of their businesses as well as our community.
Any further questions? No. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for all your hard work, and we will be voting on this ASAP. So
Thank you.
Is that short enough?
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, next up we have a presentation from Mr. Roger Giroux, Assistant Commissioner with Western Region Coast Guard RE, the USAT Brigadier General M.G. Zelinsky Project. Did I get your name correct?
It's Gerard. Right?
Gerard?
Gerard. Unless you're from Montreal, and it's Giroux.
Giroux.
But
Okay, well, I did the French part.
but thank you for trying.
Okay.
Your Worship, councillors, members of the public, thank you very much for the opportunity to come to speak to you tonight about my good friend General Zelinsky. We are going to do something about Zelinsky, and that's what I came to describe to you tonight. And this is basically the rundown of the bullets I'm going to discuss, give you as much detail as I can in a very short package. I know you're short on time, but I think it's sufficient interest to council and the public here in Prince Rupert that it's worth going into. So why the Coast Guard? Well, we, like all government officials, work under rule of law, and we are undertaking this because of our responsibilities around being stewards of the oceans under the Fisheries and Oceans Act. And so the Coast Guard is charged with pollution issues, and that's why we're charged by the federal government to take on this challenge. We have responsibilities under the Marine Spill Contingency Plan, and so any large event comes to us one way or another, either as an overseer or as an active participant. So Zelinsky, down by Grenville Channel, not too far from here. The vessel on the left is a World War II transport. She was in fact built in 1919. She went down in 1946. She's resting in about 100 feet, 15 fathom, 30 meters, depending on your metric, not too far from Hartley Bay. about 60 miles down the coast. Those of you who fly don't get down there very often. The fishermen and the cruise ships and the ferries know this neighborhood pretty well. Grenville Channel on a nice day, not like today. Challenging spot. The logistics around this are challenged. We've got weather issues. It's going to be a very intriguing operation, but certainly doable in terms of the science around salvage work. And we're set to go with what will be a very integrated team of players and partners. Our challenge as we start this mid to late September is we're into the wet, we're into the winds, and certainly one of the defining factors will be how much work we get on any given day because of the weather and the tides. 2 to 3 knot currents in there, not easy for divers or remotely operated vehicles. Challenging neighborhood in terms of geography, and of course a lot of community players are watching this, including our First Nations neighbors, 3 with significant stakes in the neighborhood, and we've already begun our engagement to explain what it is that we're doing and how we're going to make use of the talents, local knowledge, and skills that they bring as waterside peoples. So the ship is not a war grave. Nobody died that stormy night. So she came up on the rocks, ran aground, they all got off, and she was lost to us till 2003 when the first set of burps indicated where she was. There's no archaeological or historical value. As I say, she's at about 100 feet. She's a sovereign state vessel, so there are some intriguing elements with regards to our conversations with the United States. That's been put into train, and that conversation will continue. She's got some unexploded ordnance, some very large bombs. She wasn't a ammo transport, but she did have some bombs on board. She's got a mix of solutions and cleaning products and turpentine, a variety of things on board, paint, gasoline, as you see. The big issue for us is the Bunker C. Maximum load of fuel was 700 tons. She didn't go down with that. Our rough guesstimate is that she'd probably have 600 tons on board given the length of her voyage. That's if a fair amount of it has not already leaked out. So in truth, we do not know exactly the amount of fuel we're going for. Bunker C, you may understand, is old style molasses. You had to heat it to burn it. It's a very challenging, very persistent pollutant. And so when we saw that as being the problem in the last couple of years, we decided it was important to get that fuel out of there for the environment and for all the issues around that. This is a side scan sonar image of the vessel. So she's sitting on a shelf, as you can see, at about 45 degrees, rather precarious. As you know, that's a fjord of sorts, so she's probably caught up in some gravel. The stern of it is actually hanging out over the edge. So it's a challenging little beast. She sank onto her back, crushed the superstructure, and of course all the dry cargo got shook up and is mixed up in those dry cargo holds. The fuel tanks are the ones in red, so they're now at the top of the vessel, reasonably accessible. One of the things we do have to be careful of, though, with the age of this wreck, it has deteriorated. That's why we've seen some leaks. We're not sure if it's only around the rivets, so we have to worry about seams and dissimilar metals and whether some of this hull is actually really turned into rust. The goal is the maximum removal of pollutants safely and to the maximum degree that we can. We can't say that every single ounce of Bunker C will be gone. We're not going to send divers down there with toothbrushes. The goal is to remove the lion's share to make sure a major event, a major slick does not occur. We'll also go after some of those other pollutants. So the fuel tank, the turpentine, the paint. We don't know what condition they're in.
And what about the bombs?
The bombs, the advice there is that we leave them there. And the reason is because of because the experts tell us from the Department of National Defense that if you start jostling them around, you stand the risk of having a detonation. They're large 1,000-pounders. They're solid. If you don't play with them, they'll be happy. So our job is to do this safely, to oversee the contract and the paperwork and the execution of the effort, and to deliver the message of what we're doing while we're doing. We plan to do this in the public domain. We will have a team to communicate consistently, regularly as to what's going on. And then for any amount of oil or other pollutant that does escape, to make sure that it doesn't reach shore and damage any of the fishing grounds or the shell beds. So to do that, we'll have a on-scene commander on site. We'll be using a little cove called Low Inlet, and put a set of accommodation barges there. A pair of contractors will do the work. One contractor will do the salvage work, and that's, we think, under a system called hot tapping, where they put a hose, hot water, soften the bunker C, and then with another hose remove it, get it up into a barge or a small tanker, and that's taken ashore and disposed of. A second contractor will serve as the response organization. So if there is a small spill, if there is an upwelling while we're doing our work, they capture it. The Coast Guard will also have its resources from the northern part of the province located, ready to back up the backup. We recognize that this is a sensitive area for any number of reasons, and so we intend to make this as clean as an operation as we possibly can. We will put an incident command post into town here. We will stand up a team that oversees, manages, and communicates what we're doing. We'll be doing all the paperwork around contracting. The request for proposals have been out for 2 weeks. We expect contract bids around the 25th or the 26th of this month. And my hope is that we start actually putting the team together in town the middle of September, setting to work the latter part of September, early part of October. So the big contractor has a lot of work to do. He has a number of plans to put together, including where to send all this waste. We don't know if it goes to China or to Alberta. The idea is that it is moved off and disposed of. They have a range of contingency plans to put together to be deemed acceptable as the contractor of choice. And then, as I say, the response contractor will stand by to clean up whatever it is that does come up. There are some risks here. I will not underplay the possibility of at least a small escape of oil. That hull is fragile. We will do a survey to start to know exactly what we're working on, but that itself brings about some elements of risk. So we recognize that. We believe that we're better to do it as masters of our own destiny with a team in place than to let time bide and let Zelensky choose when it wants to burp in a way, in a fashion that we may not deem particularly helpful. You mentioned the bombs, and so we've had a number of bomb disposal experts look at the manifest, look at the cargo. There's some small arms ammunition, there's some flares, there's some white phosphorus, there's some small things like that. If we can find it in that jumbled up hold, we will remove those pieces. Whatever the small pollutants are, we will look at removing that as the next phase of this particular piece. So the goal is a bunker C primarily, and then going after the rest of the pollutants to the degree that A, we can find, and B, that we can remove technologically without increasing the level of risk. And that's why the bombs we've decided, the big ones, are best left where they are.
What happens when the ship deteriorates and starts tumbling down the fjord underneath the water?
So the possibility of that hull melting, essentially. I mean, you've seen the pictures of the Titanic and the rust sickles. That lays out there in the next 30, 50 years. And so that's something that we'll have to watch and monitor. From a pollution perspective, we're going to monitor the site for the next 3 years to make sure that the entombing of the oil is effective. If 5 years from now there's an upwelling, we'll be back as we've been back in town the last 2 times there've been upwelling. If there are concerns around the state of the hull, then that can be revisited at the time.
And my other question for you is, why are you doing this so late in the year when the weather gets bad?
There were a number of options, including the timing. The team that started to do the staffing to get this to government, to cabinet, and to Treasury Board tried to start this moving last fall. 2 things have sort of slid us to the right. 1, that administrative process, and 2, there's a salmon fishery, and we were asked not to be around during the salmon fishery. I won't say that that was the preeminent reason, but when we started looking at maybe being here in August, if we could rush some things, we were told that would not necessarily be a good time. So we're doing the compromise, the great Canadian compromise of not being in the area and disrupting that fishery, which we all recognize has had its challenges in the region, and trying to get this done before the really bad weather occurs.
Okay, thank you.
And just to let you know, though Coast Guard has lead, there are a number of other federal agencies that are participating with us, particularly Environment Canada in terms of water testing, fish bed testing, etc. Transport, Health Canada are all players with us. We've asked the province to participate with us in our Incident Command Center. And indeed, we've asked for First Nations liaison, not only in the command center, but down at the site. We've already started the communications with a range of stakeholders, this being part of that process. Had 2 sessions with First Nations this afternoon and another one tomorrow, and that will be an iterative process. So we are, I would say, 50% planned right now. I'd like to be farther along, but we need to receive what the contractors got. We need to receive the planning elements from the other departments. And so what we've presented to date will get refreshed and delivered again to the various partners. Here we go with a range of stakeholder engagement, and then we get into the plan. So first, do a survey of the hull, then assess and secure the wreck, remove the pollutants, and then when we're done, we've assessed that we're not going to get any more, shut ourselves down and declare ourselves complete. 3 years of testing to make sure that it's done right. And just so you realize that, yes, we do know what Incident Command is. That team is being formed now. We'll have, it'll range pretty widely from a dozen to probably 50 people at any given time here and down on the site. We have a science table, and that's Environment Canada led, a number of agencies with a stake in terms of the health of those waters, advising us, including when we come to some risk phases of the operation, how to best mitigate anything that may go wrong. And because I like communications, it's an isolated spot, but I need to have constant communication. So we're going to put a temporary satellite-capable communications net down off the site, basically to feed not only briefing imagery and do VTCs, but we're going to have live camera to be able to watch the whole operation come and go. Not too sure it'll be much more exciting than watching paint dry. That's my goal. And if you haven't been down that way, Low Inlet just to the north in the green, that's where we'll be putting some of our equipment. And there are the satellite repeaters there on where the stars are, getting the signal up and into this particular headquarters that we're going to put here in town. Sorry?
Won't leave that repeater there for us?
It's actually kind of low, and it won't do you much good. Our goal, as I say, is to be full disclosure through this. We'll do briefings every single day in the headquarters, but we'll be looking to do media briefings periodically, and certainly I'd be happy to return to council if there's anything that's of interest as we move along.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Well, thank you for informing us, and
All right.
we look forward to you having a successful.
We plan to be successful. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, bye-bye. Okay, we now have a presentation from Constable Maury Tyre with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. If you want to come forward, and it's in regards to the current longboarding situation in Prince Rupert and development of a road safety education program with youth.
I do have something really
Okay,
quick if you
that's
guys
great.
just more suggestions. It's kind of a little murky right now where everything stands.
Size.
If you
It's
want,
size.
If you want, I'll actually
Long
go for it.
and fast. Small. Longboard goes really fast. Judy's a longboarder.
Someone longboards here already? Excellent. Okay, so if you want, I'll just get going. And
So you're new to the community?
I'm very new to the
How
community.
long have you been here for?
I have been here for 2.5 months.
Well, welcome to Prince Rupert.
Now, I've come with WebFeed already. I've come from Bella Coola.
Okay.
So this is the big city to me, so you'll excuse me. There's paved roads and there's more than one road. So this is kind of something new. I try and stay away from that actually. Okay, just a really quick overview. In the last 18 months, the RCMP has fielded 33 complaints regarding skateboards/longboards on our streets. There's over about 300 complaints that involve skateboards. However, there's only 33 that involve them on our streets. Now, on a regular basis, however, the RCMP consistently will go and say deal with kids, talk with kids that are using the streets unwisely, encourage them to get off the streets. At this point in time, we're not going out and ticketing on a regular basis. However, that gets to where we sit with our present legislation in the city. Right now, Prince Rupert Traffic Bylaw 2470 7.01H says no person shall use roller skates, skateboards, sleighs, skates, skis, or other similar means of conveyance on any roadway. So right now, I mean, in the city, there's already bylaws that say these things shouldn't be on the streets. So one of the things that we're kind of looking at is what we received is more or less a letter of direction to kind of look at doing an education program in regards to the longboards. Is we almost need to know from council before we go forward, are the longboards going to be allowed, or should we be bringing essentially the hammer down in a sense for enforcement? And I'll kind of go through the different options available because there are different things that different cities are doing in regards to longboarding right now. The ticket for it is really, it's not an overly large financial fine. It's $25, in which case you're probably going to be looking at most of the people, it's going to be their parents paying. The bulk of the individuals riding are between the ages of about 14 and 18. However, there are some older folks. I say older folks. Yay! There's also some people in their 20s riding that are actually, if you look, they're actually using them as commuter vehicles.
Yeah.
So this plays into some other problems in putting an all-out ban out, which is why we'll kind of look at some of the options. So of course there are risks involved with having them on the roads: concussions, broken wrists, broken legs, vehicle collisions, and inevitable right now because there isn't necessarily anything being done. There's a really good chance someone's going to end up dead, being hit by something on one of these boards, especially with some of the more unsafe behavior. There was recently a death down in Maple Ridge. There was another one in North Vancouver. So there have been deaths associated to the longboards. Part of it's behavior that's taking place on the boards themselves, rather than the actual item. One of the things to look at especially is you have to consider a young person that's maybe 12 that's hopping on a longboard for the first time is probably going to be about as stable on that longboard as a young person that hops on their bike and gets on the road for the first time. However, that's not illegal either. So there are there are some similarities and inconsistencies with it. So to take a look at some of the possible future scenarios, if you were to follow a city such as Victoria right now, it would be an all-out ban. So no boards on the roads. We see a board on the road, that's longboard, skateboard, it doesn't matter. It gets seized and it doesn't get returned to the individual until the fine is paid at the detachment or bylaw office. I don't necessarily think that's probably the way the city wants to go. It would be a fight with a lot of the young people in town. I don't necessarily think that would be the way we'd want to go, because realistically the city's trying to do business with young people and the RCMP is trying to do business with young people. So I think in talking to them, which is what I've been trying to do for the last couple months, any of the kids that I've seen, I've actually asked them about it and said, what kind of things would work? Why aren't you guys wearing helmets? Why aren't you doing this? And asking a bunch of the questions that people really kind of want to know. A second option would be to follow more along the lines of what North Vancouver's basically decided to do. North Vancouver has basically allowed longboards as almost bicycles on their roads. However, they put some bans on some of the streets. So one of the things that I was looking at almost for a proposal would be, one, they've got to follow helmet laws just like cyclists are supposed to. And I'll get into that just at the tail end of this as well. They'd have to wear reflective clothing at night, or some sort of reflection. Maybe it doesn't have to be reflective clothing, but some sort of reflective strip that they can wear so they're actually visible at night, because that's probably the most dangerous time for us right now. Reckless behavior would result in a board seizure until a fine is paid. Reckless behavior would be considered no helmet, no reflective gear, going downhill without a spotter. So there is the difference, the two kinds of boarders you've got. You've got commuter boarders, you've also got the kids that want to go fast downhill. One of the things that's more or less acknowledged, if they are going to do this in the places where they are allowed, is that they use spotters. So on cross streets, they would actually have someone to sit there and say, "Whoa," pull off, and the kids can pull off and get out of the way of traffic. So it's a matter of trying to do things safely. Trying to tow by a car, which, yes, kids have actually grabbed onto the bumpers and stuff. I don't know, maybe they're watching old Back to the Future movies or something, but they figure it's a great idea. And then boarding on streets that we decide would be banned. One of basically the suggestions we'd be looking at for banned streets right now would be McBride. You'd be looking at 2nd Ave West to Park Ave and Park Ave, and specifically that's based on the heavy truck traffic. Because that's your major route through town, and that's also where you're especially until the new roads are done out of the ports, that's where all your container traffic's coming through the town, and there's a lot of danger with the boards being there, especially inexperienced boarders. So to try and keep the kids off those streets specifically would probably be the most beneficial thing if you are going to continue to allow the boarding. Then the idea would be to actually have a longboard safety event to ramp up for next season. Right now we're really coming to the tail end of when the kids are going to be on the boards. So we can start building an education program for them, but then to actually have more of a community-based event sometime in hopefully April, where we may be possibly able to shut down a road on a Sunday and have almost like the RCMP runs bicycle rodeos, but have a longboard rodeo. In the sense, so you'd bring the kids down. In order to participate, they'd have to be wearing their proper safety gear. They'd actually have to sign liability waivers or get their parents to sign liability waivers, because when it comes down to it, that's something that no one's really interested in being on the hook for if someone does crash their board. Involved in that would be efforts actually to try and partner with some community sponsors such as Hawk Air or such as Air Canada, maybe one of the hotels. Bring up a couple reps from a couple of these longboard companies that could actually do a little bit of demonstration for the young folks to try and teach them what correct behavior is, just so they realize that maybe some of the people that are sitting at the top of the industry are recognizing these are smart ideas as well, that it's not just the adults in the city of Prince Rupert being heavy-handed. I've already been talking to ICBC Road Safe on this one. I've been talking to a gentleman out of Smithers who's basically responsible for the area. He's already sending me a bunch of essentially reflective patches to send down for the kids. They're basically ropes that they can tie on to their belt loops, etc., just so that we can at least get going with it as things start, so that if they are out at night, they're actually more visible, because it is an issue. And especially, I mean, we notice it because we're driving around a lot at night, and that's usually when we get our complaints as well, because people are coming over knolls and hills, and they're just not seeing the kids until the last minute, and it's scaring the individuals driving in the vehicles, and the kids are getting a little scared too, although they still continue with the exact same behavior. We'd also include, of course, school safety talks. So right now, we'd be hard pressed to get a full size, essentially, school safety event into the schools within the first 2 months of school. Just based on the ramp up that the school district goes through at the beginning, in talks with our school liaison, they felt that getting in to do a full event in the school would be the end of October, at which point you're almost at the end. So some of the other options would be to try and include literature into the newsletters for the schools. So go home to the parents, also try and get in and talk to the parent associations as well, just because in a lot of cases that's where the money for the boards is being generated to give to the children. I do know it was a concern about helmets, and a fundraising issue for helmets. In regards to helmets, you can get a helmet for around $30 if you want to. They might not be the coolest looking things, but when you consider the average cost of a board is about $200, the actual helmet wouldn't exactly be the cost prohibitive thing that's stopping that. It really does come down to, I don't want to wear a helmet because I don't look cool, and other people aren't being forced to. In regards to that, and I've noticed it since I've been in town here, and I did spend before policing, spent a great deal of time in Vancouver when they were actually really rolling out helmets in the province of British Columbia, to the point where everyone, including individuals that were homeless and collecting bottles on the side of the road, were wearing helmets. It was made very, very clear you had to have one if you were riding a bicycle. So it isn't something that's been happening here, and that's pretty clear because it's very rare that you actually see an individual on a bicycle wearing a helmet. So one of the things we'd be looking at is actually trying to generate something along the lines of a press release, basically an advance warning, and go through with warning tickets, probably for the first 3 to 4 months. That if we see people on the road exhibiting the unsafe behavior, no helmets on bicycles or on boards for that matter, that we'd actually start issuing them warning tickets and let them know that there's going to be a cutoff date when it's not warning tickets anymore, that it will actually be tickets. So, and make it a long-standing thing where basically I kind of looked, when I was looking at calendars, etc., I actually looked at December 31st being a cutoff, in the sense of if it comes down to it, for those that celebrate Christmas and give Christmas gifts, that's even an opportunity to buy a helmet for your child. It could also be an interesting time because you probably get a bunch of kids that are going to receive longboards for Christmas as well. So those are kind of where we sit right now, and it's just really what we're looking for is some guidance from council, because for sure it's the people vote for you folks, and you are the ones that make the decisions. So,
Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
Thank you for coming down. I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't do an all-out ban, because you're just going to have more kids on the street that are going to be trying to do this in the dark. And the second suggestion of regulating it and governing it with some fines would be more suitable, I think, for the kids in our community. I think $25 is a bit light. In North Vancouver, they start off at $45. So, if the parents are allowing their children to do a sport that is so high risk, I think that they should be willing to educate them more and have that responsibility of paying $45 first offense, $75 second offense, and third, confiscation. So it may sound severe, but like if you look at some of the websites on ICBC talking about kids losing their lives, being paralyzed, etc., it's a small price to pay. Some of the costs that would be some of the fines that are being paid could also go towards helmets for kids who can't afford helmets, because there's a lot of children in Prince Rupert that aren't able to afford helmets. And I actually know a couple young kids that he said, I don't have a helmet. I said, well, you can have one of our old ones. So it's not from a lot of the times it's not from defiance. It's from a different social issue that we have to address as well. The other street that I would suggest is Smithers Street. It goes right into Park Avenue, and even though they're getting deterred off the major areas of town, we're actually just pushing them more in the outskirts of town. So they were at the top of Smithers Street the other day waiting for a bus to come up, and it's just sitting there. You sort of want to watch what's going to happen, and it's a scary sight. So those are my suggestions. I'm not sure if Anna probably has a couple more.
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, thank you for coming. This issue is certainly one that's of concern. I agree with Councillor Carrick-Pearson. I don't necessarily feel like there needs to be an all-out ban, but there does need to be some awareness and some, safety measures put into place. I did like a lot of the things that were in the second suggestion. I'm not sure how I feel about having them at night, because the difference I see is that a bicycle, you can put a light on it, you can put reflectors at the front and the back, and a person can see it in a vehicle. With the longboarders, I'm not sure that there's the ability to put enough reflective gear on there for somebody to actually know that it's there. So I'm not sure how it could be done, but I kind of think that they should be allowed to longboard during the day, but maybe not at night. So I'm not sure if there's ways of doing that. I agree with the fines, but that's something obviously we'd have to take on because that's a bylaw issue. So I do like the idea of not taking away the aspect of being able to use these things, but more so educating them that, these are things that we see you're using in a positive way, and as long as you're using them in a positive way, then we're going to encourage that. So I really like the fact that there's kind of options here, not to just kind of nix it, but to find a way that we can work with it. I mean, sure, there was a day when, people didn't want any bicycles on the street, and they went through with rollerblades and all of the other things, right? So.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also agree with Councillor Judy Carlick-Pearson and Anna, but I'm really in agreement that you let the public know and the kids know through the paper and with the schools and stuff, because, then they have fair warning, and really lay it out to them so they are aware of where they can go. That would be good.
Councillor Carlick-Pearson and then Councillor Thorkelson. Thorkelson.
I knew you were going to get one of our names wrong. I really like that suggestion of the daylight hours. I really do, because at least on a bike you have a little bit more maneuverability on the road and brakes. So I really like that. Now, just a question for Mr. Long about how would we enforce this? I'm sure the bylaw officer is probably going, oh, great, another something else to. Do we have to? Are the RCMP able to give fines as well, or is it a team effort, or how would we govern it?
Yeah, the RCMP will enforce our bylaw if we ask them to do it.
Councillor Thorkelson.
I just want to say that there is a bylaw that we would have to change. That first of all, I guess I want to thank you for one of the better reports I've ever seen from the RCMP on any issue. That was an excellent report. Thank you very much. And if we're going to do this, then I think that we need to, put some thought into what the difference is. And, I'd like to ask the officer, what's the difference between roller skates and skateboards? Like where do you start drawing the line? I'm just asking safety wise, right? I see kids going by on skateboards all the time in front of my house because I live on Big Sixth, but I didn't know there's a difference between skateboard and longboard. So, so what is the difference between one goes faster? I know I'm old. We used to have skateboards with little wheels on like this, and we certainly never. The only time they were ever upside down was when we fell. So the but what is the difference? I mean, I don't think sleigh, skate, skis are going to be any huge issue, right? But I think that what is the difference regarding roller skates and skateboards? I guess really are the two things as opposed to longboards. So I don't know. I'd like to know the difference. And the other thing is I do believe that there is a difference between any kind of skateboard or rollerblades and a bike. A bike has brakes, right? And it is you're on. My guess is that you're under a lot more control when you're on a bicycle. At least I would be a lot more control if I was on a bicycle. But and I think it may be good for us to talk to or to ask our staff to have a look at if we're going to contemplate doing the second suggestion, which is not an overall ban, but a regulated activity, that we have a look at what roads that would not be that would not be open for longboarding, right? And I certainly like the idea of spotters. What the kids like to do, they like to come down Big Six, right down the hill. They like to go around the corner just after PJ's, right down to Dry Dock Road, right down Dry Dock Road, and then around the corner at the bottom onto George Hills Ways. The kids do that all the time, and it just makes me sick to my stomach every time they go past that corner at PJ's, and then they go way out so they can go way down, and then around the bottom of the corner. I every time I see it, and with no helmets, I just feel that somebody's going to land. I had a friend, I'm sure you all Rupert people remember who he was, who fell off a skateboard at the bottom of Atlan Avenue, and he without a helmet, and he wasn't he suffered severe concussion and certainly some brain damage after that took a long time to heal. And so I years and years and years, and so I'm really big on helmets, and I'm wondering if we're doing this, if it's possible to say, I have no idea if this kind of a bylaw is even possible, but to say that if somebody sells a new bike, that a helmet be required to be partnered with that new bike. I don't know if we can legally make those, but if somebody sells a bike or a skateboard or rollerblade, something that we say should have a helmet, that a new sale would be illegal without the inclusion of a helmet. Now you wouldn't have to buy one; you just have to show that you had one.
Councillor Thorkelson, we've got a really long agenda here tonight, and
okay, well,
I know this is
yes.
important, and I think we need to move this to another agenda to discuss
well,
it. If you have any questions of the
no, I have a motion, and that is that we ask staff to talk with Constable. I never know what you guys are. Constable Tyre. I'm sorry, all officers. Constable Tyre to regarding regarding the recommendations for roller skates, skateboards, as well as longboards, what the differences would be. So come to report to council, including the idea of which streets should be banned, and the idea of if you can have a regulation regarding the sale of one of these things that we're going to allow on the roads that have to be partnered with a helmet.
Councillor Thorkelson, second by Councillor Ashley. Call for the question. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to clarify that we actually don't have roller blades anymore, Councillor Thorkelson, or roller skates, and they're now advanced to roller blades. And longboards they're speed boards, so there's a lot of momentum. So they're getting as fast as vehicles in the community areas. So, question.
Question's been called. Those in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks.
Yeah, anytime you guys want to meet with me, by all means, I'm more than willing to sit down.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving right along. Reports and recommendations. We have a report from the city planner. Application for development variance permit 1002 Edward Avenue. The recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP 13-11 for 1002 Edward Avenue be approved. Mr. Krekic, do you want to come forward or do you want to stay there unless we need you?
Well, Your Worship, I have all the attachments
Okay.
on a computer, and I'd just like to note that since this development variance permit was issued to public notification, we did not receive any comments, inquiries, or any suggestions that would preclude you adopting this this development variance permit. Having said that, I'm available should you have a question that requires overhead.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Call for the question's been called. Those in favor? The motion is carried. And next is 6B, a report from the city planner. Again, the application for development variance permit 930 11th Avenue East. The recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP 13-12 for 930 11th Avenue East be approved. Mr. Krekic.
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, same responses for the first report. We did not receive any comments or inquiries or suggestions that will preclude Council from approving this development variance permit.
Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? So motion is carried. And 6C, report from the city planner, application for development variance permit 1241 8th Avenue East. The recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP 13-10 for 1241 8th Avenue East be approved. Mr. Krekic.
Your Worship, same response. We issued the public notification and did not receive any comments or suggestions that would preclude approval of this development variance permit.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Carlick-Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Question's been called. Those in favor? Motion is carried. And now we have another report from the city planner, antenna systems policy. The recommendation is that council adopts antenna system policy and amends zoning bylaw number 3286/2009 to reflect the intent of the policy. Mr. Krekic.
I'd like to use the overhead projector.
Go ahead.
Basically, this report, Your Worship, is very, very similar to the report that you saw a couple of 3 months ago. At that time, I recommended that we proceed to develop our antenna policy for development of new antenna systems, which essentially comprises of all of the features that we use, or all of the methods that we use to place technical stuff high up. It includes towers, it includes monopoles, and a variety of other names. The template that we used was created by FCM and Canadian Wireless Association of Canada, and essentially what we've done is gone through internal internal review. I had a couple of meetings with various staff members who know something about it. We also have some expertise from City West. We then proceeded to have an open house, and so the antenna is no longer featured on the front page. It's just a little bit inside under departments, under the planning and land use, and now it has its own little place down here, antenna systems. And so this was the schedule that I suggested when we commenced the results of the open house. Were actually quite good, considering this is not a very it's not a very popular or controversial topic until the controversy happens, which is exactly the reason that I'm trying to put it in place at present time. As well as we had one of the worst rainstorms on that day, and May 1st, it rained sideways. By the time I took all the stuff inside, I was wet from the front. When I came out, I was wet from the back. Nevertheless, we have some community members here. There's an implant, our past employee, although he was interested in this stuff. Here I'm talking to, enthused public. We had a reporter and another implant. This is Mr. Horn. He was actually quite interested in the situation, and I appreciate him being there. We took some notes and such. I'm just kind of letting you know that we've covered all the points, but I will keep this map for later on. And so, essentially, the document that you have attached to your report is a template which we changed slightly. We've had both FCM and Canadian Wireless Association of Canada review it. They were okay with it. We had our legal advisor look through it to make sure that everything is okay. And subject to the council approving this policy or accepting this policy, there'll be a requirement to amend the zoning bylaw. And that is on page 99, the bylaw, which is not coming onto your agenda until slightly later on. But in general, what the changes to the bylaws will be, zoning bylaw will be, is to exclude certain references to antennas in a sighting and in a height requirement in our bylaw, and place it under a whole new section that would say for antennas and words that we then reference in antenna systems, you have to go through this separate kind of a policy. Before I go through the policy very, very briefly, I think it's important to note, out of interest, that this is the first federal jurisdiction that I've seen that's actually allowed local government to even come close to opening the door. And so a federal jurisdiction has had so much pressure from a variety of the locations where these issues become very problematic at the local government level, that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the association dealing with this thing has actually worked with Industry Canada to allow this process to be present. So very quickly to the draft policy, probably the most work, and we haven't done a heck of a lot of it on this piece, is in development guidelines. And essentially, the reason that I wanted to keep the SmartTap map, during the consultation process, I carried this map around, and as we were, one of the points that actually is quite important is to say, do we have areas where we encourage, and do we have areas where we discourage antennas? And so out of this process, what it became evident is that we can use the official community plan, and we can say that all of the yellow and red, being residential and commercial, are discouraged, and all of the green and gray, which is open space and industrial, are encouraged. That being said, you still need to go through the entire application process. An application process essentially is fairly well, and in some situations you can say procedural event where the proponent will have to essentially provide any information that we see would be of interest to the community, and most importantly, that they would have to provide that information to the community themselves, therefore safeguarding us. Go ahead.
I just had a question. So, with regards to the circled area, so the discouragement of the antennas there, so would that mean that basically be like a development variance permit? So if somebody wanted to put an antenna in like the residential or business area, that they'd have to come before council? Is that kind of, or how is it that they wouldn't be allowed at all?
Yeah. No, it's an excellent question. So in discouraged area, encouraged areas, it's more or less trying to show the proponent, if you are in discouraged area, you are going to probably end up having to make the decision made by Industry Canada. Because the end result of this policy is that we issue concurrence or non-concurrence letter. If you issue a non-concurrence letter, which is all the staff work, if we issue a non-concurrence letter, then the decision has to be made by Industry Canada, which, by the way, is still in place now. And so they have the last kick of the can, but before they get there, they will not be coming through these doors promoting their projects only to find out that there are some community issues. They'll be coming to staff, and we will assure that they address all the issues before we come to you to let you know that.
Question. So I guess the reason I'm asking that is that when City West has come before us, they've talked about doing like Wi-Fi hotspots, and I didn't know if this antenna policy would affect that in any way.
It would affect anybody who builds antennas in the city boundaries. So this applies to all of the carriers, and City West is one of the carriers. And so City West, for example, as they were participating with in our situation, they're quite mindful about stuff like this. And so we were talking about camouflaging. And so in Kitimat, in their new Kitimat office, they have, and as you know, I reside in Kitimat as well, and I never knew that was an antenna. It's just a power pole on steroids. It's just a twice as big power pole. It's down in an industrial area. And I've never really noticed it until I was told, and I'll say, yeah, okay, this is antenna. So it's things. Really, we're talking about aesthetics. One of the things that we said that we are discouraging pinwheel antennas. So that's the antenna like the one by Butsy Rapids, where you have a whole bunch of stuff hanging on top. So monopole would be just a single unit going up and down, and that's a lot less obtrusive to an individual than having a tower with a pinwheel on top. So that's a long answer to a short question. And I did not have enough time and actually knowledge how to format the Ryoko on holidays. So the things that are missing in here is the flow chart that has to be fixed. I assume that you would appoint city planner to be. Nobody downstairs has raised their hand and said I want to be it, so that would be your official, so to speak. And the Appendix B hasn't been completed. The fees are established at $2,000 per application. That's my presentation, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ashley.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Councillor Thorkelson, please.
I was just wondering if why would somebody want to have a tower in a residential area?
Basically, it's about coverages. It's it's about using being as close as you can to the locations where your customers are. And so I'll give you an example with the one in Terrace, where there's a controversy about locating it, at the edge of residential area, which would be right across from in the area of Max Mill gas station. And so the reason that they're placing it there is because their calculations say that this is the optimum position to serve 2,000 people who have been complaining that don't have good reception. And so it's about topography, it's about users and locations, and sometimes they we have applications that are, we have one application right now that's asking to use our water tank for a tower. And that water tank is what we call discouraged area. So the conversation that we have downstairs is to assure that if we allow that it doesn't provide to be a obstacle or visual obstacle to residents nearby. That's more or less the reason for why they're locating in different places.
And is this mainly to do just with cell towers?
I apologize.
Sorry, is it just cell towers that we're concerned about, or are there other kind of towers? Like I know that there used to be a few people in town that were ham radio enthusiasts, right? But they don't seem to have large towers located on their property and seem to have things affixed to their roofs.
It's to do with any transmission of information that requires Industry Canada approval. So it would include ham radio operators just as well. Their antennas are generally quite short, quite a bit smaller, but they would have to come through the same process as any other ones. While I was doing the bylaw review, I noticed that we actually still have TV antennas and terrestrial radio antennas that we were allowing, and so it's kind of moving the benchmarks. But we will have, with respect to your comment, Councillor Torkelson, we will have more antennas in the future, but it's likely that they're going to be smaller and more frequent because of us depending not only on cell phone, but everything that carries data, computers, wireless computers, and exchange of the information by iPhone, large documents, and all that stuff, that all has to travel through these variety of airwaves and antennas. And that's where my expertise with antennas stop.
Question's been called. Those in favor? The motion is carried. Okay, we now have a report from the Manager of Engineering and Public Works. I don't see him here.
No, Your Worship, he thought we could handle this one on our own.
Okay, so it's dust control on the waterfront and Pinnacle Pellet Plant. The recommendation is that Council receive this report for information purposes. Did you want to give us a little report, please, Mr. Long?
Yes, I think the report's pretty self-explanatory. If Council had any questions, it's just for information. This is the way we're dealing with this perceived neighborhood problem.
Councillor Ashley?
I'll move that the recommendation.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next is a report from the Manager of Engineering and Public Works again, Ministry of Highways intersection paving. Recommendation that Council receive this report for information purposes. Mr. Long.
Yes, the intersection paving is complete. So we just, I think Bill just wanted Council to recognize that the intersection paving that we're going to do this year is done. And we'll be encouraging highways to put us on the priority list for next year as we have ongoing challenges with our arterials.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Carlick-Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Call for the question. Question's been called. All in favor? Motion is carried. Oh, Councillor Thorkelson.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask on this report, and I know the report has been adopted, and I'm not suggesting we not adopt it, but I would like to ask a question. When we talked about the pellet plant, we were My memory serves, if it serves me well at all, is that Prince Rupert does have a air quality bylaw and said that we could enforce it if there were problems from Pinnacle Pellet, and this seems to contradict that. And I did want to see if we could get an explanation. Maybe it can't be given now, but maybe be given at the next meeting about why there seems to be. When we talked about it, we talked about not being able to. Pinnacle Pellet could do what they want. We can't enforce it, but that at the time we were talking about air quality and that we would be able to enforce an air quality fine. And I'm just wondering, can we or can we not?
Mr. Long.
We may be confused as the kind of dust that we're talking about. This is the dust that's been kicked up on the road, so this is road dust as opposed to pellet dust. And I think probably the conversations about dust before were about the pellet dust as opposed to the dust that's being kicked up because the summer has been so spectacular and dry. Basically, the laydown area and the driving back and forth on the front has caused road dust problems with waterfront and that area along there. I forgot the Beach Place. Our grandma used to live. Yeah, so that was a dust problem. But I think I'm making that distinction. I'm not sure that our ability to regulate, if we can regulate dust, we can regulate dust. I'd have to see what bylaw we're using to do that, whether we're relying on federal or provincial regulations. But dust is dust. But this particular report, I think, is specifically with respect to that road dust generated by the laydown area as opposed to the pellet dust.
Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
I don't think Prince Rupert's ever been faced with the problem that we have enough sun that produces dust. I thought it was the other way, that we actually have too much mud and muck throughout the city and not dust.
I would hate to think that council and or the city is in any way against the sunshine we've had this summer or the things that have been generated as a result of it. But dust can be a nuisance, and we do have a nuisance bylaw. We do have some regulations with respect to these kinds of industrial behaviors to make sure that these nuisances are not visited on the residents, and I think that's really what the report tries to address here and make sure that we always take an educational and moral suasion approach first, and if that doesn't work, then I can look into the sort of more regulatory approach to make sure that these things don't cause problems with the community.
Councillor Thorkelson.
Yes, and I do agree that dust is dust, and I raised this because there were complaints by people on Water and Beach and on Second, and I think that all I'm wondering is if we don't. This report would lead me to believe that we could do nothing, and I'm saying if that's the question, we can do nothing about dust other than play for rain, then were we given false assurances that we could deal with the Pinnacle dust? And so that's what I'm wondering is do we have the tools, and if we don't have the tools, if we could see if there's tools that we could develop to deal with dust. Not that I think that we're probably, look at the weather now, it's probably settled in. We probably won't have a problem for the rest of the summer, unfortunately, but I do think that my concern was, can we deal with dust?
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, and I do recall what Councillor Thorkelson is saying with regards to when the port was talking to us about, and when people were talking about they were talking about pellet dust, but I'm wondering if we can maybe just get a clarification from the port CN about what process that we go through in terms of that, and what, just maybe clarification on what we talked about.
Certainly, Worship, we can.
Oops, sorry.
We get the clarification on what authority we were going to rely on in terms of regulating the dust. I can check on that. Might be in the zoning bylaw. It may be that we're ultra-virus to the port's property. There's a number of issues, and I'll get to the bottom of it and get you that answer.
Okay, Councillor Kinney.
They were going to have trucks.
Your Worship, were they not going to have trucks? A couple of trucks they were going to have for that?
I
Down
thought
at
they
the
were going to,
CN.
yeah, I thought they were going to spray, but I don't know what's
Yeah.
being done. So I think things are being looked after in the road dust department. But if we could
Yeah.
clarify that, that would be great. Has been called. All in favor? Motion is carried. Another report from the Manager of Engineering Public Works, solar-powered speed signs on Park Avenue and McBride Street. Recommendation that council receive this report for information purposes. Mr. Long, did I miss F? No, we did F. The intersection paving? Yep.
Yeah, we will. Bill says within the week we will have the new crossing, solar-powered signs with flashing lights to help the pedestrians cross safely.
At 9th Avenue and McBride.
That's correct.
Okay, I need a recommendation. Councillor Ashley, and seconded by Councillor Carlick Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? The motion is carried. Report from the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Deputy Corporate Administrator, appointment of election officers. The recommendation is that Robert Long, City Manager, be appointed as the Chief Election Officer, and that Tanya Ostrom, Assistant Operations Manager, be appointed as the Deputy Elections Officer for the 2013 municipal by-election. Moved by Councillor Carlick Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Anybody have any questions? No. Okay, Councillor Ashley.
I was looking at the cost and budget implications, and I remember when we were talking about this originally, I know that 30,000 was kind of at the top end. I'm just wondering why is it more of a safety to make it at 30, or are we thinking that it's really going to cost that much?
Yes. We are anticipating it will cost less than that, but I think just in case, and Tanya and I have had a couple of conversations. Both her and I might want to do things a little differently. However, we are going to do things differently a lot more slowly and so we're going to try to stick to the same patterns that people are used to, but at the same time move back the number of tables because we don't anticipate the number of people, those kinds of things. So we're going to try and save some money where we can. But I wanted to make sure that we budgeted enough money, and then we will report out on the actual expenditures, and I anticipate that they will be less than that number.
Thank you. Question's been called. Those in favor? Motion's carried. Did I get a mover and a seconder for that? I did. Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay, report from the Acting Chief Financial Officer, June 2013 monthly financial report. The recommendation is that Council receive this report for informational purposes. Moved by Councillor Carlick Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Ms. Bombin, did you want to comment on any of this? Or does anybody have any questions? Councillor Thorkelson.
I was just wondering if we're can identify the monthly passes for adults, if that was a problem with the college. Monthly passes many times are bought in bulk by either Ministry of Social Services or whatever it's called now, and or by the, I believe the college also supplies them. So I was wondering if it was a problem with bulk sales and if we should be trying to identify that, or if it was just individual sales. Is there a possibility to identify that?
Yeah, we can identify it basically because we bill the ministry. But when I was speaking with the finance manager, she mentioned that it looked to be that it was the ministry that hasn't been buying nearly as many.
Question's been called. All in favor? Motion is carried. We have a report from the City Manager and Deputy Corporate Administrator, regionalization of the Prince Rupert Airport. The recommendation is that Council provide staff with direction to regionalize the Prince Rupert Airport and explore sharing the airport access costs with neighboring communities. Anybody want to move that one? Moved by Councillor Carlick Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Go ahead, Councillor Ashley.
I'm just wondering if we could just get like a just quick overview of this. I mean, I've read through it, but I'd just like to hear from staff like what because there's a number of different options and what they're thinking.
Okay. Mr. Long or Ms. Bombin?
Certainly, Councillor. Basically, the mayor had asked for us to explore the possibility of regionalization of the Prince Rupert Airport in such that we cost share the access to the airport with our neighbors who all benefit from the airport just by virtue of it being there, either by the fact that they get their mail, that prescriptions are flown in. It's also access for tourism and also other economic development along with any types of pleasure trips. So with that in mind, we were looking at what the cost was and how much the City of Prince Rupert residents typically subsidize the airport access. And over the past 5 years, approximately the average is $800,000 a year comes from the City of Prince Rupert citizens' tax base. And so we looked at some possible cost sharing options, one being a user fee and increasing the user fee to go over to the airport and back. And based on the costs of our future capital maintenance that we know has to be done over the next 5 years, that would increase the user, we'd have to add a user fee of an extra $14 on top of everything else that the Prince Rupert Airport Authority would already be charging. The other option would be to bill the SQCRD, well, not so much a bill, but send them a request for how much we would need, and then they could bill their tax base. And option 3 would be a budgeted cost share, in which case we identify the communities that benefit from the airport, and then we come to some sort of an agreement and cost share annual operating expenses based on what the budget was from year to year. And the alternative would be to ask the regional district to take the airport ferry and access road over completely, in which case it would truly identify it as being a regional operation.
Councillor Ashley.
Well, I'm noticing the recommendation that we've moved, basically just saying, yes, we want to give you some direction, but it isn't giving you any direction. And I guess at this point right now, and I'm not sure how other people are feeling, there's a lot of different aspects involved with each one of these different options, and I'd kind of feel more comfortable if we had a little workshop or something like that to go through these and look at the pros and cons before we made a decision. So I know there's a motion on the floor right now which we can pass, which doesn't really say anything other than, yes, we're going to give them direction. But I think I'd like to make a motion subsequent to that about talking about this in a workshop. I don't know how other people feel.
So why don't we?
Do you want me to just add that as a friendly amendment to the recommendation that we that we ask staff, in addition, the direction would be that we ask staff to have a workshop with us where we could go through the pros and cons of the various options so that we could make an informed decision.
Seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? The motion carries. Okay. Number 8. Proclamation request for the Friendship House Association of Prince Rupert. The recommendation is that Council declares September 9th, 2013 as FASD awareness in the City of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Call for the question. Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
This September 9th is a national day for FASD. Not only will we be declaring it in Prince Rupert, but it is a national fetal alcohol spectrum disorder awareness day.
Okay. Councillor Ashley.
I just wanted to also say that I think we get a lot of proclamation requests, and they're all important. But I think this is one, like, it's just an opportunity to make people aware of that this is this is something that affects a lot of people, not just in our community, but across all of BC, all of Canada. So it's just important that people are aware of it.
Okay, thank you. Call for the question. Question's been called. All in favor? Motion is carried. Resolutions from closed council meetings. Corey or Ms. Bombin, did you want to do that for us, please?
The resolution that council is releasing from the closed meeting was made tonight, and it was moved and carried that council authorized the city manager to sign the partnering agreement between the City of Prince Rupert and the Prince Rupert Airport Authority to provide them with a loan.
Okay. And we don't have, that's all we do with that, right? We just declare that? Okay. I have to go to the bylaws now. Okay, so now we're on to bylaws. The Airport Authority Agreement Loan Authorization Bylaw number 3333/2013. The recommendation is that council introduce and give first, second, and third readings to the Airport Authority Loan Authorization Bylaw number 3333/2013. So moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Councillor Ashley?
Just wanted to make a quick comment. I mean, obviously, everybody heard what the airport authority had to say, and I think it's just something that needs to be done for the good of the economy and Prince Rupert. And I think the other thing that just needs to be emphasized is that this isn't going to be paid from people's taxes. It'll be paid by the people that use the airport, and I think it's just going to make our community better to have an airport that is strong and viable.
Call for the question's been called. Those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, zoning amendment bylaw number 3334/2013. The recommendation that council introduce and give first and second readings to the zoning amendment bylaw number 3334/2013 is set a public meeting for September 9th, 2013. Moved by Councillor Ashley. Seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Call for the question. Question's been called. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Okay, report from City Manager. Any outstanding council initiatives?
I'm not prepared tonight to make a report. I'd be happy to report in September on where we're at with some of those issues.
Okay, thank you. Reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Ashley and then Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
This is just a question for staff. I know that UBCM is coming up next month, and there's a number of different ministers that we're going to be meeting. And I was just hoping that there'd be a chance. Sometimes in the past we've had sort of like either a workshop or meetings just talk about what we're going to do in briefings. So I'm wondering if that's in the plan for somewhere before we go down there. So just a question.
Sure. We at the staff level will be preparing documents so that you will be clear on what it is that is expected of you when you get down there. And I'll talk to His Worship just to make sure that we do get an opportunity to be briefed. It may be more practical to do that when we're down there, but if not, I'll talk to him about when we might go over those issues before we're actually in the meeting, which I think is a great suggestion.
I had a question. A couple months ago, we had a field that was going to be dedicated to Miss Patty Hutching, the ladies' field that we agreed upon. But I didn't hear any correspondence of what was going to happen, if we were going to bring the family in and give them the news, or if there was a letter sent out to them, or what involvement we were going to have. I may have missed it while I was away, but update.
The Director of Recreation has been in contact, as far as I know, with the individual that brought the issue to our attention.
Councillor Thorkelson.
I just wanted to say that give you a report on economic activity in Prince Rupert, and I want to say it's been the worst season ever that I can remember for the gillnet fleet. You know, people who fished up here had a average catch of 500 sockeye per vessel in the gillnet fleet, which is probably around $1,500 for their annual income. So there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to be able to get employment insurance even this winter from that fleet. The other side is that the and that's really because of the Skeena sockeye failure, and I think that we'll probably hear lots more, and I think we should be asking the Department of Fisheries to come and talk to us about what they're doing about that. For 12 years they didn't examine the Babine Lake, and that's where it looks like the failure is mostly in the Babine Lake, and so it'd be interesting to see what they have to say, since they actually did get a study. They got some money for a study this year. But what I would like to say, this is the largest and busiest season that we've had in many years on pink salmon. And the payroll into Prince Rupert, from what I can see, for 3 pay periods now has been $2 million, just short of $2 million each pay period, which has meant that shoreworker wages in this community and at the community of Lac Wallams together, Port Ed, Prince Rupert, Lac Wallams, have been $6 million in 3 weeks. I mean, in 3 pay periods. So that's within a 4-week period. So I kind of challenge anybody else to come up with a payroll of $6 million in that short of a time frame. And that's people who live and reside in Lac Wallams, Metlakatla, Prince Rupert, Kakatla, and Hartley Bay, and Port Edward. And at the same time, the Seine deckhand earnings have been about the same, or the Seine fleet earnings have been about the same, another $6 million, which has meant $12 million in really a 4 or 5 week period that have been circulating through our community. And I'd just like to say that I think that businesses and other particular businesses in town are must be feeling a lot of economic impact from that welcomed money into town. So I just wanted to say that the fishing industry can make a huge impact into our community. It's not like we used to have $128 million. This is 12. It's a pittance compared to what it was in the late 70s and early 80s when Odd Isaac used to do the calculations, and it was around $128 million annually because we've lost a lot of our wintertime work. A lot of that money has left our community. The other thing is that I'd like to report that there was a collective agreement negotiated with the shoreworkers this year that I think was fairly hopefully significant for this community. Canadian Fish has agreed to process all of its northern caught hake and pollock, other than what's needed for bycatch, to prosecute the other fisheries in Prince Rupert. So they have a lot of hake and pollock quota, so we should see some significant increase in wintertime work, which was negotiated in our collective agreement. Plus, the company, we have been concerned that we might lose our cannery because there's been no training of trades, and the company's agreed to have an apprenticeship program this year as well. And so the wage increases were insignificant, but the work that we think that we're going to receive, at least for our senior workers, we believe is going to be significant, and that again should be pumping money into this community during the wintertime when it is most needed.
Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
I just wanted to commend anyone who was any of the committees that were involved with the snowbirds that came to Prince Rupert last week. It was a really, really great turnout, and it was actually one of the first times that I've seen the snowbirds. I was really impressed, and even though council, we weren't able to financially support this event this year.
We did.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Well, not for the total amount that was requested, but even though we weren't able to fully financially support, hopefully in the next coming years we'll be able to contribute more. But I really want to commend everyone who was involved in it, and it was such a wonderful turnout. So thank you.
Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. To follow up on that, a special thank you goes to the Rotary for doing all the work that they've done and to get them here each year. And Crystal Lorette and all her executive and everything from Rotary. They're a great bunch of people for our city, and they need a big thank you.
Anything else from anybody? Motion to adjourn, Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Carlick Pearson. Questions been called? Those in favor? Motion's carried.
Judy, what time is this thing?
I know,
Is it
I
this
see.
Thursday?
I thought we were going to be here
This
till 10.
Thursday. What time?